So yeah, it's an interesting title. This is our joyful hour, and I like that title a lot. Usually, I don't. I'm not very good with titles. I always struggle with that, and so I think about that a lot. And so what happened with this piece is this is actually the piece that I worked on during a kind of a difficult period in my life. I was going through the ending of a relationship, a divorce, and so I came to the point where I had to kind of take a very difficult action, and kind of make the decision to move forward in ending this relationship. And I was coming from an appointment, and it was very difficult. And I got in my car, and I was kind of at a real low point. And I turned on the car, and the radio came on. And the first words that came out of the announcer's mouth were, this is our joyful hour. And I kind of laughed, but I didn't really know what to make of that. And it's funny, how things can kind of strike you when you're in a really tough spot or in a really low spot. Things can come out of the blue and surprise you, and that's what happened in that moment. And I kind of thought about that statement, this is our joyful hour. And it kind of occurred to me, that is really the nature of life. That we have these really terrible things that happen. Sometimes these really terrible choices that we have to make. But that in the midst of that, there can be joy. There is joy that persists. And that, in life, we I think a lot of us, we would like to go through life and experience only good things and have, just joy. But it doesn't work that way. We don't get to choose our experiences. We don't always get to choose what happens to us. Things happen, but we can always choose our response to them. And I realized, that in the midst of really terrible things, in the midst of really difficult decisions, in the midst of unimaginable difficulty, we can make the choice to be joyful. We can make the choice to find joy. Joy doesn't disappear. There's nothing, just because we're in the midst of a really horrible situation doesn't mean all joy in the world is suddenly gone. It can feel that way. But the reality is, in the midst of your really awful day, somebody else could be having a really amazing day at that same moment. And that thought really kind of struck me that, we can make any moment, we can choose to be joyful. We can choose a better outcome. And I thought, okay, well, that's the piece. And so you asked me about, themes and goals. With that one, I guess that kind of struck me that this is this piece. It was presented to me in such a way that I'm like, yeah, that's what wants to happen. And then as I worked on the piece, it kind of started to take on another meaning for me, about the act of creating, about the act of making music and of making art. That act of creation is also a joyful hour, a joyful time, and that anytime a group of musicians chooses to come together on the stage and to engage in the act of music, whatever music they're making, that is a thing of joy. That is a joyful time. And when an audience comes and they sit down and they listen to a piece, that is an hour of joy. That is a joyful engagement. And that's really kind of what I began to think about with that piece, is that, we have that choice in our response, but then we also have this choice to come together and to create something. Nobody's making us create these things. It's not like, oh, I'm under contractual obligation, I got to go play a concert. We're choosing to do that. People play in community ensembles. People pay to play in ensembles sometimes, because that coming together is powerful and meaningful. And that was another kind of thought that went into the writing, the process on that piece. So